Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahe, Tejaswina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Welcome all. So let's resume from last week, and I want to cover some interesting topics that came up, and I thought about them. So let's just clarify a few of those topics, and they were all mentioned by various people here. And the first one is on this topic of destiny and karma, which I'm just not going to get too much into detail. But in 2006, Al Gore, if you remember Al Gore, you remember Al Gore from the he was one of the candidates for the president. He was doing an inconvenient truth, and he was basically showing the audience the impact of global warming on our society, but also on polar ice caps, on health hazards, and all of the repercussions that our collective society is contributing to this CO2 emission. And one of the members in the auditorium asked him, so he said, Mr. Al Gore, according to your model, how and where do you see these projections of our ice caps melting and our CO2 rising? Where do you see all of this going in the next 100 years? And Al Gore answered, it depends. It depends on what we as a collective society do. So in other words, it's not something that is set out there. It's not something that is, it's going to happen and then there's nothing that we can do about it. So this is actually a brilliant definition of what this, when we mix it with this destiny and karma. So as we said last week, destiny is really just what happens right now. So there's actually no space to talk about this word destiny or prarabdha unless it happens right now in the moment. But the only thing is we talk about destiny as though it is predestined. It's going to happen. So there's absolutely no conversation for destiny at all until it happens right now. And then when it happens right now, it's not like it's pointless saying, oh, that's just your destiny, because what we do then is we apply an action to get out of the situation or to handle the situation. So you can see how we're just showing you really how these terms, they get like just used, overused. But if you put it in a proper context, you realize that there's actually no place to use them because they're just meant to be understood. And once you understand them, you just move on with life, right? Instead of philosophizing about them. So in the same way, if you could say like to Ishvara, and Ishvara could speak, as all knowledge could speak, and you ask Ishvara, so Ishvara, according to our current society, where are we all going? How are we all going to end up 100 years from now? It's not like Ishvara is going to say, well, this is what's going to happen to David and to Robert and Rani and Dave and James and Madhu and Lloyd, and this is what your family are going to do, and this is what's going to happen in Antarctic, this is what's going to happen to New York and Mumbai and Melbourne, and this is the culture that's going to see. It's not possible to tell because it is not up to anyone except our collective society to determine what is to happen 100 years from now. So not even Ishvara could tell you what's going to happen 100 years from now. So again, this is what destiny, which in Sanskrit means prarabdha, and the word karma, which is action, which implies effort, because wherever there is action implies not only effort, but effort implies our choices. And what is a choice? It's nothing but self-effort. And what does self-effort mean? It means an effort applied by myself, not others' effort, but self-effort. That's why self-effort and karma, they're closely tied in. Okay. Now, the other point was that this definition of surrender. So I want to bring up this, clarify this surrender topic, because often we say you just got to surrender. What do you mean just got to surrender? Surrender to what? Surrender to whom? And how do you surrender? And what does it mean to surrender? And in what context are you even saying the word surrender? So before anything, you'll notice that in Vedanta, we always clarify these words precisely so that no one's thinking about one thing and someone else thinking about another. So let's bring now this topic of surrender. There are two types. The first one is what you'd call a worldly, that means a surrender pertaining to worldly events. For example, I surrender to something external. Or what do you mean, surrender to something external? Well, we're like a doctor. You surrender to a doctor. It's an external object. Now, why do we surrender to a doctor? Someone tell me, why do you surrender to a doctor?
We trust in him.
Trust.
Yeah.
We trust his decision.
Yeah, we trust his position. Okay. So in other words, we acknowledge our incapacity, we acknowledge our incompetency to resolve this, whatever this is. In this case, it's health, a health condition. So I first acknowledge that he knows better than us. Good. So that's what Kritika said. So the doctor knows better than us. Now, in order for me to acknowledge that the doctor knows better than us, I have to first acknowledge that I don't have the ability that the doctor has, right? So that's step one in this surrender. And I also temporarily suspend my sense of individuality. Now, what is this individuality? It just means my sense of know-how. So as long as I keep my know-how that I can solve this by myself, that I've got all of the knowledge, then as long as that person is there holding on to that idea, then this idea of surrender is just not going to happen. You're going to stay home sick, not going to take any action to check the health condition of the back or x-ray or blood samples or any of that, because the person knows much better. So this means that we have to surrender our individuality. Why? So that we may be helped. So it's not like you're doing this, you're actually doing this for yourself. So this kind of surrender is really just helping yourself by giving yourself to someone else who knows better. Now, there is another kind of surrender whereby you go to a border patrol and you got to cross over to a different country. Now, this kind of surrender is really just kind of like surrendering your passport. So it's not like you're surrendering some, it's not like it's an individual is involved. You just have to like surrender something in order to get over the obstacle. So you can see how this surrender immediately changes the meaning. The one surrender is I'm surrendering my individuality, my sense of know-how so that I can go to the doctor. But this one, I'm surrendering my stuff right over there. So again, the word surrender changes. And this is all under worldly surrender. So this worldly surrender just means I take refuge in an external object. Why do I take refuge in an external object? Because I recognize, as Kritika said, that external object has a much larger scope, a bigger view about the situation, which I just lack. Okay, so this is how we move through life. We go through these series of surrenders. We ask for some like a bank loan. You know, you have to surrender your job details. You know, they have to see how much you make per year, and then you show that to the bank. And then on the basis of that, the bank gives you a home loan. That's another kind of surrender. And also any kind of mastery, if you think about what you know, what you're good at right now, suppose you play piano or you have some skill like singing or dancing or painting, or you know some particular topic like biology or geography or anything. You know, that mastery really just came there because at some point in the past, you had to surrender what you know. You had to surrender your place to the teacher who was teaching you. So this means the only reason why we are here today is because as a person, as who you are, what you know, is because you went through this series of surrenders. Now, suppose that, see, it doesn't stop here because there's this blind surrender and then there is this intelligent surrender. Now, what do I mean by that? Suppose that someone has a brain tumor. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to go to a professional who deals with these, to a doctor who deals with these tumors. Now, so they said to surrender their position. Now, once they receive this advice by the doctor, and they say, well, you can do radiotherapy, and you can do 2 more options, right? So you got 3 options now. Now, do you just sort of just go along with that, whatever the doctor says, or do you stop and you think which option makes sense to you? Yeah, we still stop and we still think. So this surrender is not the kind where I become like this slave, like take me wherever you want. It is whereby I offer my individuality, I put it aside so that I can receive some help. But once I receive what I was looking for, I don't stop there. I still use my viveka, my discrimination, to assess if, according to what I think, what I feel and know about myself, am I comfortable with this? And then, if I make a decision, then you move forward onto the actual advice. Okay, so surrender is not passive. It is an active process. It involves the mind. It involves thinking. And this is that small distinction that we have to make. Because there's, otherwise the person is going to make the wrong choice and then blame the doctor for providing the wrong choice. Okay, so that's worldly surrender. Now, the second type is, this is the surrender that Draupadi, when Draupadi surrendered to Lord Krishna, when nobody was able to help her because she was being disrobed, and then she finally resorted to Lord Krishna. So what kind of surrender are we talking about here? This is not the kind of worldly surrender that I just explained, because it was something much deeper than surrendering to an external object. So this kind of surrender is surrendering to something that is non-perceptible, to a non-perceptible power. That means it's a power which I cannot perceive, but I know it exists, or at least I trust it exists. So what do I mean by this? How do you fall asleep?
When you feel sleepy.
You let go. You let go of everything.
Okay. Now, who lets go? Does the waker let go? Does the waker surrender?
Yeah.
Okay, but I'll get to you in a second, Mikhail. In your experience, if there is one trace of waker going, I want to sleep, I want to sleep, I want to sleep, I surrender the waker, are you going to fall asleep?
No.
No way. So it is not really the waker that surrenders, but it is something much higher, something greater than the waker, which makes the waker surrender. For example, if you're there trying to surrender, your waker person to go into the dreamer, you wouldn't be successful no matter how much you try, because you know how it is. One thought of the waker that is left, it's going to obstruct me from receiving what I'm trying to receive, and that is the sleeper. So in other words, the waker does what? The waker has to surrender to something much greater than the waker, and that which the waker surrenders to, it causes the waker to surrender to the sleeper. Yes, Mikhail?
Yeah, I was thinking it was kind of like along the lines of faith. Faith that what you believe is going to happen, that you can trust. You don't understand why or how, but you believe it's true and it's there. You've experienced it throughout your life. Things have happened. And so, yeah, you surrender and it happens. So there's a faith there.
Yeah, okay, good. So what I was saying is that every single night, we literally apply this surrender that Draupadi is talking about, the surrender to something other than the person, the thinking self. So as Mikhail said, what is this kind of surrender? It is an intention, because when you go to sleep, you actually say, I actually want to go to sleep. A waker says that. You say, I want to go to sleep. But do you keep on saying, I want to go to sleep, I want to go to sleep, I want to go to sleep? Do you do that? No. So you put out an intention one time, and then on the basis of that, you just let that go. And that's where that faith, as Mikhail is now saying, that faith that I may receive what I'm looking for. But it's not like there's this waker that's obstructing that reception by going, I hope I receive what I'm getting. Let me keep on thinking that I don't lose it. You know, so in other words, the waker lets oneself go so that he may receive what he is looking for. So this kind of reception is what we call grace in the scriptures, and that's called prasadaha or anugrahaha. So when we say this word grace, what we're talking about is this surrender number 2, whereby I can't really, it's not me that is doing the receiving, but the very person that's trying to receive lets him or herself go so that he or she may receive. You see that difference? So it's totally different than the first kind of surrender, where the waker, where the person remains. It's like me, and I want to like surrender, but the waker's still there. The person's still there. They're just like surrendering their thinking, but they're not surrendering themselves. Whereas in the second, the entire person surrenders themselves. Two completely different versions of surrender. Okay, any questions about this before we move on to the next clarification? Yes, Lloyd.
Yeah, I think I was getting a bit mixed up by your meaning of the self and yourself and the waker and the terminology you were using there. So,
what specifically, Lloyd, was getting mixed up? The wake. Okay, okay.
When you say the waker, I mean, are you saying that's another name for the self?
No, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't, but
okay. So,
are you referring to that though?
No, not at all. So, okay, good. So, what happens often is when we use examples in Vedanta, we often tend to, our imagination goes wild, right? So we now try to apply it to so many different things. So when I use an example, retain or stay with that example. Don't try to go outside it and see how this now applies to Ishwara, is now Ishwara, the waker, and then, who now, is dreaming this one big world and so on. So this is not what I'm talking about. So just to show you that this version, the second version of surrender, is whereby the entire person lets him or herself go. The thinker, the one who thinks I have to be there in order to receive, that very thinker has to let him or herself go so that I may receive what is called grace.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Now, the other topic was this topic of Kelsey, you're looking up so strange. Okay. The other Kelsey, okay? You have any question? I think your video is just stopping. Okay, now the second topic was prayer. Now, we'll ask, okay, what is prayer? First of all, Swami Dayananda from, yes, Robert?
Just want to ask, so grace is not received by the discriminating intellect?
Yeah, so the discriminating intellect is the initiator, but it doesn't stay there in order to receive.
Okay.
That's why I say it's a one-time intention. You don't say, I want to sleep, I want to sleep, I want to sleep, I want to sleep. You just say, I want to sleep, and then you let go of that intellect.
Okay.
Okay, so these are fine distinctions because, see, the second kind of surrender is how this self-knowledge takes place. So, see, what happens is the seeker, when I say the waker, you can also equate it to the seeker. So as long as that seeker remains there and he's trying to look for moksha, he's trying to look for a much larger understanding, what happens is that seeker remains and he thinks I need to remain there in order to receive the sought. But the whole point is that the seeker has to surrender in this example that I'm using so that he or she may remove themselves so that I may receive this larger vision. That is why no matter how intelligent a person is, or no matter how much they try, how many books they read, no matter how much they try to intellectualize this, it's simply going to fail. Why? Because the very person is still obstructing. They're in the way of what they're trying to receive. But the whole point is that person is to be put away. But they don't want to put themselves away because they want to remain there. So thus the seeker and the sought always remain valid. They're always two. So you can see how it's actually a big point to understand the second type of surrender, because it is the surrender whereby knowledge or self-knowledge transforms directly, which is called aparoksha jnana, direct knowledge.
Yeah, I've never really understood that before.
And how about now?
Yeah, I do get that then. It's not the way surrender is taught these days in modern spiritual literature. Surrender these days is referred to as accept what is and don't wish what is to be other than as it is.
Yeah.
That's how surrender is explained.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so, I would like you to think about the second kind of surrender, because when it comes to self-knowledge, then only the second kind of surrender works. The first one is where the seeker tries to remain there, but that becomes the very obstruction to that reception. So they actually never receive it. Okay. Now, the topic of prayer is Swami Dayananda Saraswati said that the highest expression of free will is prayer. I'll get to this word free will just a little bit later. The highest expression of a human being's free will is prayer. Now, what do you think this is? That means it requires the most amount of sophistication and thinking and rationale and understanding to engage in a prayer. What do you think this is?
Is it because it's directed to the Lord, to God?
Good. So what Rani said is, she said the word, she said Lord. So in order for me to engage in prayer, I have to understand, I have to have a certain understanding before I even engage in prayer. So what kind of understanding do I have to have? Firstly is that Ishvara, the all-intelligence which sustains this entire world in the past, present, and future, is not biased. In other words, it's value neutral. And this is a huge understanding, because our understanding of Ishvara, of the Lord, is someone who rewards good people and someone who punishes bad people. But in reality, Ishvara is that value neutral principle, intelligence, which simply connects all of the laws and orders together. And how we suffer and how we actually move through life depends on whether we are aligned with those laws or whether we are not aligned with those laws. It's simple as that. It's not like the laws are forcing you to fail. In other words, what's happening is I am out of alignment with those laws, and because I am, I fail. And then I blame Ishvara. But Ishvara is simply providing the platform onto which and through which I get to move through life. So, so the reason why this requires a high level of free will is because nobody in this world can guarantee 100% results of what they're looking for. Nobody can say that. No matter how much you went through life, whatever you want, you don't get exactly what you want. And we all know that. In fact, if we gotten what we wanted every single time, nobody would be here, right? Nobody would be totally happy. So this understanding, first of all, takes some courage to admit that I can't get everything by myself. And for this reason, we convert that helplessness, that sense of I can't get everything by myself, into what we call prayer, into asking for help of this one intelligence which sustains and upholds this entire universe. Now, what happens if our understanding of this intelligence is partial? Suppose it's because, see, there's no such thing as 100% ignorance. There is not a person in this world that is 100% ignorant, and there is no person in this world that is 100% knowledgeable. It is always a mixture of ignorance and knowledge. And that is the dilemma of humanity, which is I don't know whether what I know is true or I don't know whether I know is false. So we mix the two up and then we live as though, it's true. So what happens? If I don't receive what I'm looking for, then I get angry at Ishvara. Very common. In other words, if I don't understand these laws, then the first thing that I do is to make myself feel good, I say, you see, Ishvara is not, it's just another idea out there. And another point is, see, when we were growing up with our parents, every child sees their parent as God, because that's the only two human faces that you have. They take care of you, they're there for you. So through the course of time, we recognize that our parents show us inconsistencies. Now, as they show anger, they're not 100% honest. So in other words, our definition of God, of Ishvara, gets distorted. So later on, we have this hard time assimilating what is Ishvara, because in our childhood, if Lord, let us down, and I saw what Lord is, then how am I supposed to accept Lord, which I cannot directly see? So there's this hard time accepting, number one, the presence of Ishvara, and number two, the authenticity of Ishvara, and number three, the validity whether I should pray to Ishvara in the first place. Because if my parents let me down, they were God, then definitely Ishvara is going to let me down too. So understanding there's this idea about accepting Ishvara, and this takes some time to assimilate because our childhood also interrupts this idea. Okay, suppose your favorite vase is falling. Suppose your grandfather or grandmother bought you a vase, and it's being held in generations for multiple generations, and now it's falling. And while it's falling, you go, oh, Ishvara, please stop this vase from falling. Is that going to happen? No. If that happened, what would happen? Ishvara would suspend gravity in the entire world just for you. Then you have people flying all over the place, and airplanes going up into space, and everything would just be one big mess, because I wanted Ishvara to suspend gravity just for me. So this is what we mean. If I don't understand Ishvara, then I will be angry at Ishvara. But if you bring it into context, then you see that it is not black or white. It's not like Ishvara has to comply just for me, because if it did, this is the kind of problem that it would create. Everything would be messed up in one split second, just so I could get what I want. So the point is, you can't change law of gravity, but you can understand the point or the law of gravity, and thus work with it. So this means once I understand Ishvara's laws and I align myself with Ishvara's laws, it leads to my own success in life. For example, baseball. To play baseball, you have to know the impact forces of the ball and the angle that the bat hits the ball and how far it flies. That requires some knowledge of gravity through the course of time. You need knowledge of gravity to build a airplane or a shuttle and take it up into space and put satellites, which is now helping you to use GPS. So if one understands these laws and aligns and lives with these laws, that is what we call living in dharma, living in alignment with these laws and orders, which you don't have any control. In fact, it's not us that creates gravity, but it is gravity that is given. We simply participate in these laws. A human being born is offered what? Gravity, electromagnetism, physics, and then we end up having to align our life with this. If we don't, then we all fall down the building and die. So in other words, no one can step outside these laws because they are provided by this one intelligence which connects them all. In fact, tomorrow hasn't manifested yet, but it will manifest from the standpoint of tomorrow. Now, do you have to do anything about that? Do you have to make sure that happens, or that's going to be done for you? It's going to be done for you. In other words, all we do is we just wake up and we find ourselves in a new, fresh day. But that day is already provided. It's given to you. So it's not like we have to go, okay, I now have to connect this day to tomorrow. It's already provided for you. We simply find ourselves in those laws and then participate throughout them. So this is what we mean. The one intelligence which is true in the past, that connects the past, that connects the present, and connects the future. And that one intelligence is Ishvara. Okay. And okay, what else happens if I don't understand this one presence, this one intelligence, and I have this partial knowledge? Very common. The person ends up living as though indifferent to life. Like, I'm indifferent. I'm so detached from life. It's just all, you know, appearances. It's just all an illusion. Face it, there is not a single person, honestly, that is indifferent to life. Impossible. Even the sages who speak, because I get it, there's these, you know, there's these texts in the scriptures that say, you know, it's all just appearances, and you know, you get this impression that this person is totally detached from life. This is the misinterpretation that we receive. But the reality is, if you were completely detached or completely uninvolved or completely indifferent to life, then you wouldn't, you know, bother eating, wouldn't bother going to a doctor. I'm indifferent to my body. I'm indifferent to the scorpion sting. I'm indifferent to my parents' death. I'm indifferent to my friends' help. It's just all appearances. Can anyone do that? Can anyone live like that? No way. So there's no need to pretend like one is indifferent to life, because that is just impossible. As long as a person is alive, there will be some relation, some association, some emotional connection to the environment to which we get involved with. Okay. And why else can we not separate? Why else is it unreasonable or illogical to say indifferent to life? Because the one that's saying that is not away from that which they're rejecting. Because the person is made out of what? Soil, earth, air, space, fire. And life is also nothing but fire, space, air, soil, and so on, the 5 elements. So how can the 5 elements reject the 5 elements if they're just the 5 elements? Right? So it's a completely logical thing to say. Okay. Any questions before moving on? Okay. Polite. Someone raised their hand. Okay. I'm going to lower your hand now. Yes, Dave.
Hey, Andre. Just wanted to know, if we live by and accept the laws of Ishvara, what's the purpose of prayer?
Okay. Okay. So the second, okay, so good. So what is the purpose of prayer? The Vedic culture is one of prayer. It makes one humble, first of all, because to prayer means what? I'm not the total here. I'm not one that knows all, that controls all, that you know, has all knowledge. So first of all, we have to redefine this word prayer, because when we think prayer, we think just putting your hands together like this and going to some other person. See, even to read a book is prayer. Even to listen to a satsang is prayer. Even to contemplate is a prayer, because prayer is nothing but asking. And are you ever not asking? Like when you eat food, you're actually praying. Please, you know, may this food nourish my body. When you pray for, you know, tonight you want to go to sleep, you're actually praying for this to take place. You're praying, let this take place so that I may rest. So this prayer and asking, they're not separate. That's why I brought this topic up, because Draupadi was the one who was asking Lord Krishna's help. And that is, in a sense, prayer. In fact, in the Vedic culture, it is a strongly devotional culture. You know, a culture that is in rituals and devotion. And what does this ritual and devotion mean? It just means I acknowledge the presence of this one intelligence. It doesn't contradict, by the way, Advaita. because I acknowledge the presence that is in this and that is not different from the essence that I am. So it makes the person humble. It's not like you have to pray. We're just bringing out that asking has a purpose in life also. We're not telling you need to pray.
So is it more a humility and appreciation for what is rather than, because I'm very new to Advaita Vedanta, but
right.
Sort of historically, I've always thought of prayer as in prayer for an action. You're asking for something, whereas I like the idea of Advaita Vedanta that it's, if you live a certain way and you practice things a certain way, you don't need to ask for anything in that regard, because you just accept what is. But I understand that level of, contemplation and appreciation for what is and just reflecting on that. It's less about action and more in that sort of frame. Is that
good. Now, Dave, I was going to answer your question. I was going to address that why ask question from last week just in 1 second, and I'll cover that topic a little bit. Okay, now Martin last week also said this word unconscious and conscious. So again, we have to now define what is conscious and unconscious. Okay, what did he say? He said that conscious and unconscious thoughts determine our karma, our action. So my question now is, okay, what is conscious thought? What is this conscious mind, which you hear in the West? Conscious mind just means deliberate thoughts. What does this mean? Deliberate thoughts means actions, words, and thoughts which are in my sphere of alertness. They are in the sphere of what I'm alert. The moment those words, thoughts, and actions go outside that sphere, that is what's called unconscious mind, unconscious thoughts, unconscious words. Okay, so now everything that is in this sphere of my alertness, when I say alertness, I'm just saying that which I know is going on. And that means I can intercept it. I have the choice to apply purushartha, that means self-effort, and say, actually, I want to do it different. So all of that is taken in the place of this sphere of alertness. So whatever is in the sphere is what we call free will. The moment it goes outside the sphere, it's no longer free will because it is not in your alertness. Do you understand that point? So this is where this idea of free will constantly confuses people, because you have to bring into account what am I alert and what am I not alert about? Because if I'm not alert, the fact that right now someone needs help just across the street, I can't apply any free will. I got no free will there because I don't know what I don't know. But the moment I hear some noise of some help, like help, instantly it gives me now a choice, because it's now in my sphere of focus. Now it becomes free will, because now I can say I choose not to help, or I can say I choose to help. Okay, so what is unconscious thought, unconscious mind? So when a situation presents itself, that means there is you and there is a situation. Now, when I say situation, I mean through the five senses you capture it, either through your eyes, through your ears, through your tongue, through the feeling, through a smell or anything. So when the situation presents itself, it triggers a past conclusion. A past conclusion. What do you mean past conclusion? See, you haven't been in this situation just once. It is likely you've been in the situation many more times. And every time we're in a situation, we conclude what it means. We created this idea, okay, here's what help means. Someone screaming help, here's what it means. So if suppose you're in a country and someone screams help, and when you come over, they actually scam you, because some countries actually do that. They actually put a scam out, and then you go, oh, you help me, you're not supposed to help me, now you got to pay. Now, suppose that happened to me before, and someone's saying help in Australia. Now, what kind of conclusion am I going to create? According to the bad luck that I experienced in another country. So I'm going to carry that conclusion over into the present, and I'm going to color in the present according to the past conclusion. In other words, what's going to happen is I'm going to create an internal picture that's going to now overlay the external situation according to my past conclusion. In other words, event takes place, I bring over a past conclusion, it recreates an internal picture, and this internal picture I am convinced by. This is it. So in other words, this is absolutely true. The moment we're convinced by that internal picture, that is called unconscious thought. In other words, we don't question that internal picture. Okay. Now, is that clear? What unconscious means? Okay. So what's the result of this? This is what we call projection. You know, when we say you're projecting, you're assuming. That's not what I thought. That's your projection. So this is what we're talking about when we say unconscious mind. In other words, something similar happened before with some other person. I took that conclusion modified the kind of picture that I have about this situation, and therefore it made me have certain thoughts that correlate with the past conclusion, and those thoughts were now painted or are painted over the present situation. And then because there's no correlation between the present situation and that picture, it creates what? A conflict. So that's not what I thought. You're not listening to me. And then we create a misinterpretation of what is actually going on. So this is called projection. And yes, Mautik.
So basically, I would like to correct the Pandu situation over here. Like when Pandu thought that there was any animal which is there behind the bushes. So it was because of his unconscious mind, subconscious mind.
Yeah, good. So that's a good example. So in the same way, Pandu had a very much a exemplary situation where, you know, he's obviously a good archer. So it's not like the first time he's been hunting in the forest or using his bow and arrow. So he's got experience. But he took that past experience, that past conclusion of what the sounds similar to a deer. So that's been taken automatically, and it created an internal picture. What kind of internal picture? Okay, there's a deer there. So what Pandu was seeing is a deer, but the actual reality, there's a wife and a sage. So what happened then? This internal picture caused the mind to create a correlating image over the external world. This is called projection. And so what Pandu saw in his world was a deer. But in the actual empirical world, the Vyavaharika world, there is a wife and sage. But which world took precedence? The personal world, because we're always looking outwards. In other words, whatever filters is presented, that is the filters that's going to dictate what I'm actually seeing. So this is caused by this unconscious mind. And in this scenario, there is no free will, because you're not intercepting what's happening. You're not saying, wait a minute, could it really be a sage, or could it be a person? Could it be something else? We're not saying that. So there's no question of free will. But the moment I go, okay, wait a minute, I'm seeing some skin, I'm seeing some strange movement that doesn't represent a deer. The moment that comes, free will begins. Okay, so that's the distinction that we have to make. Yes, Dave.
Yes, so he wasn't guilty of the crime. Well, like.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that's actually a good point. So because it was an unconscious, response. Now you can say easily, you know, in a court, you could say, I'm not guilty because I genuinely thought that it was a deer. Right now, is the law going to buy that excuse? No. Because then we could use that excuse and, you know, use it to hurt others and then get away with it over and over. So see, as again, it's not black or white, because see, now we want to take it like this. Okay, so I didn't know, I didn't have any free will. It's not my fault. So again, that's like a black or white thinking, but it doesn't work like that. Because the point is, we discussed this previously, Pandu still had the capacity to use his mind and check. That's the other aspect to it. And if he did use that, if he was trained to use that, which he had the opportunity to do that in the past, because no one was stopping him, you had the opportunity to inquire before making a buying decision. If you did that, then that would have retained itself in this more serious situation. Thus, the mistake would have not been made. It's the same thing with buying. You know, you buy things like impulsively left and right. Now, why do we do that? Because we have been buying impulsively left and right before. But I had an opportunity to intercept that before. But because I didn't use that opportunity, now I end up buying, getting scammed. So even though I had no free will, it is still my fault. Why is it my fault? Because I had the past as my friend to use to sharpen up my skills, to sharpen my mind. Okay, so furthermore, this unconscious, which consistently creates these internal images, is what creates a narrative. And this story, and this narrative is what's called, like, you know, phobias, you know, different kinds of psychological, mental issues. And now I know in India, you know, a therapist is like, you know, you're cuckoo if you go to a therapist in India. Is that true? Because I think in India, it's still a new thing, therapy. But in the West, it's more prevalent, therapy. Now, therapy just means that a patient goes into a room and the psychologist listens to this narrative, and all they're trying to do is reshape this narrative. They're trying to reshape these pictures, because these pictures are what creates these past conclusions. Now, what happens when a psychologist successfully reshapes these images, reshapes these conclusions? What happens to the subject when they walk out? Suppose the psychologist is successful.
Well, they feel better.
Yeah, they feel better. Okay, now, okay, but not only that, but their responses change. Because the narrative, yeah, change in attitude or outlook, good. So when you have a change in outlook, automatically you have a change in your attitude. When you have a change in attitude, you have a change in your behavior. When you change in behavior, you have a change in whether you choose A or B. And when you choose A or B, dictates what kind of future I receive. Now, what happens is there's a time lag. You know your experience. When there is a change takes place, it is almost never immediate. Yeah, there are immediate cases, but in most cases, there's this huge time lag. Sometimes 6 months takes for actual effect to take place. So what happens sometimes is you go to a session, like a modality, like some treatment session, and you get this, you know, amazing knowledge, or you have a change in outlook, change in perspective, and then you walk out. And then we say, you know, I feel better, but I don't feel a change in my behavior. Why? Because there's still a momentum that is going on. It's kind of like this. If a fan's turning and you turn the fan off, is the fan on or off?
Off.
Yeah, but it's still turning. So it is off, but it's also on. So we say, you see, the fan's still spinning. So you didn't turn it off. And then you say, well, I did turn it off. Well, why is it still spinning? And then you say, because there is a momentum and it takes some time to slow down. So what sometimes happens is we go into this treatment or this, and we have this genuine transformation, and then we see no changes. And we go, you see, that system doesn't work. So we blame the system. And then 6 months later, you find a different system. And now the changes start to take place from the previous system. But then we mistake that and we think this new system is doing that. We think the new system is making those changes. So we go and leave a 5-star review to this new system, and we leave a 1-star review to the other system. So what I'm trying to say is how intricate, when you account this delay and these, you know, these intricate destiny and karma and all of the circumstances that take place, how much there is to actually keep in mind, keep in track that's going on simultaneously, that goes just past our cognition. And then we make these wrong conclusions on the basis of what we see now, but actually something else in the past has contributed to what we're experiencing right now. Yes, Malcolm?
Maybe implementation of those new thoughts or new ideas is required, because until and unless we implement them, we will not see any change. It will be temporary, but we won't see a permanent change, right?
Yeah, okay. So you see, when we walk out, sometimes we just think that's it, you know, I'm now solved. No, there needs to be a follow-up in action, because that action is going to reinforce what I've understood. And the same thing with prayers. Just praying is not good enough, because praying is just saying, see, praying is just an initiator. It's just saying I have an interest to change, but nothing's going to change unless my actions are consistent or correlate with that prayer. So this action and prayer have to be together. Therapy and action are always together, just like destiny and karma. If one of them is there and the other is missing, no changes take place. And when no changes take place, what do? We end up blaming that system, where in fact the cause is my absence of action. Okay, now the other thing that was mentioned was someone said, why ask? You know, because Draupadi was asking Lord Krishna for help. And we got into this topic about, you know, asking for help. And the question was, why ask? Now, this word asking is closely related to prayer. And again, we have to define asking. Asking comes in both gross and subtle forms, or implicit and explicit. What do I mean by this? What is, for example, a gross, a very explicit form of asking? Directions, home loan, music lessons. You know, you Google something. That's all just very explicit, very gross form of asking. But there's also a very subtle form of asking. For example, you're contemplating about the purpose of life. Now, why do we contemplate? Because we're asking for an answer. Otherwise, we wouldn't be contemplating. We're listening to a session like this, or I'm listening to a session. Why are we doing that? Because there is some form of asking for an understanding. I'm asking to, you know, so that I may discover something larger than I see right now. Or going to kirtanam, you know, singing the glories of Lord. That is also asking what? For a greater connection to the divine, in a form of even if it's a feeling, it doesn't matter. It's still a form of asking. So it's not really about saying, you know, why ask? Because in reality, that question has no answer if you say why ask. And also it implies that we're telling you to ask. We're not, you know, telling you should ask left and right. We're just saying that asking also has a role in life, like anything else. Now, how you take advantage of that role, that is up to you. But we're just pointing out that asking indeed can help, because the only reason you're here, wherever you are in your life right now, is because you went through a series of asking, small asking in the form of explicit, implicit, explicit, implicit, and so on. Okay. And finally Kritika said, we only receive when we are ready. This is a good point. Now, what happens if we're not ready to receive, but we ask? Okay. If I ask and I'm not truly ready to receive, then by the time I receive it, I will compromise what I have received. In other words, I will have a partial relationship with what I receive. In other words, I will accept it partially. And because it's partial, I'm going to then blame that thing for not giving me the full quality, the full experience that I so rightfully deserve. But whose fault is it? It's my fault. Because I came with the intention to receive, but I wasn't clear whether I really wanted to receive it. This happens in, suppose that situation. Suppose you're in a event and there's this great speaker, right? The great person that, you know, great skills, and you know, and you're feeling jealous. Like, wow, they're so great, but I feel jealous. So then after everyone leaves, we go up to the speaker and say, you know, I want to get some tips from you. Like what makes you, like, how did you get to where you are? And they generally tell you, like they tell you, well, you know, it took a lot of hard work and I stayed up overnight and, you know, took constant time to, you know, from family. And you're listening, but in the back of the mind, what's going on? The jealousy is going on. In other words, this dislike, I don't like them because they're so successful. So in other words, I'm receiving tips, which I generally asked, but I'm receiving them partially because something else is going on in my mind. That is what you call not fully ready to receive. So what does this mean? There is a conflict of values. So what makes one not able to receive fully what they're asking? It means I value what I'm asking, but that value is conflicting with another value. So what do we have to do? We have to reorganize our values. We have to see how the value that I'm holding on cannot accept what I'm truly valuing, cannot, or is denying what I'm truly wishing to receive. So we have to look at our values and see if they're really serving us. For example, you know, like go back to the example, why am I jealous? How is this value of not wanting others to be successful, wanting others to fail, how is that really helping me? Because, you know, it's because number one, I'm not involved 100%. I'm not learning from them. So I cannot receive from them because I'm stepping in my own way. So this is what it means to say, not fully ready to receive. We come into our own obstruction. Okay, now let's move on to the story. Okay, what's the time? Okay, we got 30 minutes. And I will open up questions now. Okay. So in the story, in the Mahabharata, so nobody came to help Draupadi. She was asking sincerely for all of the brave men, valorous kings in this court, to stop the brothers, stop the husbands, the 5 Pandavas, but also to help her. And nobody had any courage. Why? And we discussed that everyone had their own narrative. And that narrative made one justify that here's why I shouldn't help you. And this is a common situation in life. We don't move forward because we got this our own story playing back in the, there's a conflict of values. And Lord Krishna was the only one that was able to help. And then we asked why. And the answer was because Lord Krishna is the only one that is not loaded with personal notions, not loaded with personal conflicts. I value one thing, but I don't value this. So Lord Krishna was the only one that was free of these values, of these conflicts, of these notions, of attachments, of personal narratives, of personal stories, and so on. So therefore, he immediately responded to Draupadi's request. He didn't hesitate. Now, when, you know, so Dushasana collapsed. So then what happened was the 5 Pandavas, they lost everything. They lost themselves, they lost Indraprastha, they lost their army, they lost their pride, their honor. And so they were retreated to the forest for 12 years. And the 13th year, they had to spend in incognito. This means the Kauravas were going to be active in the last 13th year. And if they were discovered in that 13th year, then they had to go another 12 years in the forest. Now, imagine you were one of those Pandavas, 5, and you found yourself losing everything. Now, how do you think the Pandavas felt being exiled in the forest for 12 years? How do you think they felt without anything?
I think they were angry. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. You go ahead.
You can go.
I think they were angry.
Angry, yeah. What else?
Humiliated?
Humiliated?
Yeah. Because they've got nothing now, though, whereas before they had everything.
Yeah, it's a big loss, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, Draupadi was with them also. Okay, how else do you think they felt?
Betrayed,
Betrayed, yeah. How would you feel?
angry with myself for making for playing that game of dice,
Right, okay.
making the wrong decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What else?
Helpless.
What was that?
Helpless.
Helpless, good. Yeah, good one. Because they lost and there's no way to get back what they lost. Okay, now another question is, so all of these emotions were going on. So this is, again, why am I asking this? Because to show us that even though the Pandavas were, they're usually portrayed as cultured and disciplined, every human being is going to go through emotions, and those emotions are appropriate. So it's not like they were denying their emotions and going, this is not going to help us, and we just need to just remain calm and don't buy into this idea. So in other words, they were totally open and honest to how they were feeling: angry, betrayed, helpless, humiliated. So these are genuine human emotions, and they're not to be avoided, because if they did avoid it, then it would cause, they would cause that inner boiling point, and that would eventually explode at some time in the future. Now, how do you think they coped with these emotions in the forest? Because we now know they had emotions, but how do you think they coped with them?
Prayer.
Prayer, okay, yeah. Did someone say prayer?
Yeah, prayer.
Yeah, good. You see how now good, that's a great context. How now prayer comes is so important now, what we discussed earlier, because that's one of the great tools that can soothe those hot, burning emotions that they're experiencing. Excellent, Rani.
Acceptance.
Acceptance? Well, is it acceptance?
Yes, I was thinking maybe.
Okay, but explain. What do you mean acceptance, Kelsey? Acceptance of what?
Well, they made the most of their situation, didn't they?
Okay, good. Okay, you're actually one step ahead now. What they actually did as a result of their coping. Good, you're one step ahead, Kelsey. Hey?
Introspection of the thoughts.
Introspection, okay. So, okay, what else? What else do you think they did?
They did not lose hope. So
They
they
did
were
not
hopeful.
lose hope. Good.
And they believed in themselves. They did not lose hope in themselves. Like they can make the situation better after 12 years. They also did make use of the present time to gain a lot of strength, lot of astras, shastras,
Yeah. Good. Okay, good point. So these are all the things they potentially did in the forest. So they made the best of their time. Yes, Robert?
Meditation, contemplation, and planning.
Yes, they definitely engage in contemplation, in retrospect to what has happened and what it now means for them, and how they can turn that into a useful way to grow.
Did they become more humble?
Yeah, definitely. So they made them more humble. Actually, I remember one time I was coming back home in response to what Adrian said, and I saw, a fight going on between, because you always find yourself as a youngster in those situations. There's a fight going on. And every single time I, always monitored how I felt towards that. And I remember, like, sometimes there was this compulsion to think, what a fool, what a loser towards the one that initiated the fight. However, very soon I discovered that I started to feel compassion actually for them, and that compassion turned into a sort of a humility, like for the attacker, as in, they don't know any better, and there is much to learn. They could have grown up in a alcoholic family. They could have, you don't know their life. So all of these thoughts were going in me, and they actually made me more humble towards these kinds of situations, more compassionate towards these kinds of situations. So again, this is all depending on how one looks at what happens instead of what actually happens. That's why we say it doesn't matter what happens, but it is what I do about what happens. Yeah, good, Adrian. Okay. Now, what are some of the, okay, so they coped okay, so what did they do? They distracted themselves, right? So they kept busy, they distracted themselves. That's what I wasn't to say. Yes, Kritika, you wanted to say something?
I was just saying that each of the Pandavas, they were dealing with the situation in their own way, and Bhim, like the way he was extremely angry, but he was also, after a while, trying to channel that anger so that when the day for the actual fight comes, because for them, war was inevitable.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to get complacent because 14 years is a long time. And they didn't want to put out the fire of anger as well, but just channelizing that in the right direction.
Yeah, excellent. So Kritika is already she actually just mentioned something I was going to say after this in terms of channeling. But before I get to that, well done, Kritika, is okay. So the Pandavas distracted themselves. Now think about this. Is this what human beings generally do in life? They cope. We established that. So they coped with emotions. And then as a result of coping, how do we manage this coping? We distract ourselves. That's what Pandavas generally did. Now, we're not there, what kind of distractions, they did productive distractions, I get it. But generally there's this distraction mode going on. Now, what are some of the ways that generally human beings who are coping with hardships of life, with family pressures, with mother-in-law, with some conflicts in relational conflicts, with some uncertainty in the economy. All of these are certainly bringing emotions. And then there's a coping mechanism. Now, what are some coping mechanisms that human beings go through today?
Distance from the unpleasant situation. Make a distance from the unpleasant situation.
Yeah, so distance from the unpleasant situation. Yeah, okay, good. So could you say that's kind of like avoiding or denying what's going on? Removing oneself? Just not physically being there? I mean, I guess
it could be both. It could be both. Like,
yeah, it could be both. Yeah.
What about changing attitude?
Changing attitude.
Changing our attitude and ideas or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Ideas and thoughts of the situation.
Yeah, so that's a much more sophisticated way now to change, to take the time to look at oneself, how they're having this reaction and so on. What are some other coping methods?
Indifference.
Indifference, good, yeah. So this is that, as we spoke of earlier, this denying it's not happening, and it's all one non-dual reality, even in a more advanced stage. So all of this is just sophisticated coping, not willing to address what's going on. It's a distraction method. Okay, what else is another coping method today from unpleasant situations?
Well, you pray to God to give you wisdom to deal with it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, prayer is good, another coping mechanism. Excellent. I think Rani also said it. Dave raised a hand.
Yeah, placing our energy on something else. A part of distraction, but making it positive energy.
Positive energy. Okay, good. David, did you raise your hand? Lower hand, okay.
Yeah. Also through raga dvesha, I guess, like stuff that we enjoy, like food and movie.
Dave, turn off your video. It's breaking down.
I don't know how. Don't worry about it.
Maybe you can type it out, okay? Because the audio is crackling. I didn't catch much. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry.
Okay. Okay, maybe next time, because I want you to speak, next time you just turn on the video and then I can hear your audio properly. Maybe that's going to okay.
Another approach is do the introspection, accept and acknowledge, whatever was in your control.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, this is all, now these are advanced methods, like Rani also said, taking some time to look over what has happened, introspection, self-reflection. These are advanced methods. What about food?
Yeah.
Overeating.
Eh?
Overeating, like eating too much.
Yeah, overeating, very common. This is, as Kritika said, the physical aspect, the gross aspect of engaging in, it depends on gender, it depends on culture. Some will cry, some will just go out, on a bicycle or drive the car fast to exhaust the steam or whatever they say. Some will even travel, right? Traveling around the world. This is very common. You have travelers, of course, that's now not possible. What else is a coping method?
Over exercise.
Over exercise, okay.
I think the
Go to the
internet.
gym for 5 hours.
Well, we're quite interested in a bodybuilder, but it's actually
overworking, working long hours.
Working long hours, excellent. Okay.
The internet.
Venting.
The internet. Social media.
Social media. Okay. Yeah, good. Now ideas are starting to flourish.
Playing games for forever, addicted to puzzles.
Yeah. Okay. So online immersion. I can definitely relate to that. As a young teenager, I spent 10 hours a day on playing Half-Life and Doom and SimCraft.
Shopping.
Hey.
You could, like you said earlier, shopping. Yeah, you mentioned it.
Okay, good one.
Buying things you don't need and too much.
Wow. Yeah. Today now online shopping also.
Compulsive shopping.
What about addiction? Like more like physical substances. That's a
alcohol. Yeah.
Alcohol sales are up, by the way, in many countries now because of COVID. So this is a coping mechanism to stay home and cope with the hardships of that. Olga, you want to say something?
I was actually going to say porn has been known to.
Say again, Olga?
Porn.
Oh, porn, yeah. Okay, good. So porn also for a certain age group who are unable to contain that desire, and they see something out there, so they they have that urge to to express that. So this is another genuine. All of these are genuine methods, and there's no discrimination which one's better or worse. It's just different methods. What about yoga? Yoga asana today, crazy.
Andre, what about the common one of venting and talking?
Which one is this? Say again.
Venting and talking.
I don't understand. What's venting?
Venting, like, when we're struggling with an emotion, we want to talk and vent that to somebody, or, share it that way to cope.
Oh, okay. I don't know this method. I'm
you
learning.
Could say maybe gossip as well. So gossiping with people is like venting, maybe.
Yeah, that's a type of it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this method. I'm new to this venting method. Okay. It's also yoga asana today. In fact, just the general spiritual world of spirituality, even going to these satsangs, it's all just coping method. And I know many former friends who, it's like inside this auditorium, it's all just serious. Like, yeah, let's talk about wisdom. The moment you step outside the door, all conditions come in. It's all back to normal. So, it wasn't that. So in other words, I wasn't asking fully. I was asking only partially. This is going back to the asking method. I was ready to receive, but only for 30 minutes, for 1 hour. But I wasn't ready to receive this for my entire lifetime. So this is what dictates Duryodhana or Arjuna, or just a common student and an excellent student. A common student wants to receive, but they don't want to receive to have a transformation. An excellent student is so hungry, so crazy about this knowledge, they just want to absorb it. They can't get enough of it. And because they can't get enough of it, they just, they make a difference in their life. Okay. So these are good methods. So you can see how human mind designs ingenious ways to cope with emotions. So we're not saying that coping is either good or bad. We're just saying it's another mechanism that human beings go or undergo, just like asking. Now, so most people are in Pandavas and Duryodhana position because both Duryodhana and the Pandavas are coping. But what's the difference? What's the difference between how Duryodhana copes? Because Duryodhana was jealous and angry, and he wanted more sense of control, power, more kingdom, more recognition by the people, more love from all. But Pandavas were also coping because they kept on getting stepped over by the Kauravas over and over again. And in fact, as long as the Kauravas were alive, the Pandavas did not get a break. So both sides kept coping. So now let's focus on Duryodhana. How do you think Duryodhana coped with his emotions? What did he do? Yes, Mautik.
I feel the emotions overwhelmed Duryodhana because he became angry and he became very selfish and mean.
Yeah, and okay, good. And so the selfishness transformed into, for Duryodhana, outward action.
Yeah, the emotions transformed into selfishness.
Yeah. And more importantly, the selfishness, he couldn't contain it. So all of his selfishness was in a form of action, always acting it outwards. Whereas the Pandavas were also coping, but were they acting their anger, their frustration outwards? No. So you can see the two differences. While Duryodhana was coping, he couldn't hold it in. So he puts in action, and that gets him into trouble further. The Pandavas, they were stepped on over so many times, and even Yudhishthira stopped Bhima from beating up the Kauravas. And how many times did he do that? So many times. So the whole Pandava strategy was to hold it in, not just take it out, but channel it, as Kritika, which I wanted to get to now, but channel it to a proper productive means. So what do we mean by this? Firstly, coping is not negative, right? It's a useful function. Like childhood, children cope also, do they not? Yeah, how do children cope? Well, one of the methods that I know is they just fall asleep. If they
temper tantrum, scream.
Yeah, good.
Scream,
good.
temper tantrum.
Yeah, you see, so there's a cross-cultural, cross-age coping mechanism all over the place. And as we mature through life, this coping gets more refined. Of course, some are still quite unrefined, even in adulthood. Or suppose there's a trauma. Someone dies in your close to you. You will know that often is the person goes to work anyway. I've heard it so many times. It's like, how's your so how are you coping? And it's like, why are you at work? Why are you not home? I could never understand how can it find themselves at work. So this is again that coping mechanism, because you temporarily distract yourself so you can move forward in life. So you can see we're not trying to destroy these ideas. We're simply acknowledging the presence of them and seeing that they just have their place, and it's okay to cope. But the person, we need to be careful. What kind of coping am I expressing that outwards, or am I being like the Pandavas and channeling it into productive means and developing, honing in my skills, redirecting it to improving, to thinking, introspecting, looking in my mind, where is this coming from? What's triggering this? Feeling into it, like where specifically is this emotion right now? And what part of the body is it present in, and what time of the day does it show up, and what kind of consequences is it having in my life, and am I clear if I have this emotion? So these questions are there as a form of using to help us through this coping method.
Andre, why are we saying that the method of Duryodhana was different than how the Pandavas were coping. Because when they lost the game, Bhima took the vow of, killing Duryodhana as well as his 100 brothers. Arjuna also take vow that, he would kill everyone in the battle. So they showed their anger at that time. They took the vow.
Yeah.
And in the battle, they fulfilled it.
Yeah.
Even Duryodhana, he could have killed them, there, but he did stop himself because he did not want that at that time.
Yeah.
But his intention was to kill them, to remove them, from the scene altogether. So what is the point of saying that the coping mechanism was different in both the cases?
Yeah, good. So we discussed this. We said there's a delay. So they had a certain time frame where they were able to stop themselves and develop skills to undertake this coping much later in a proper time. So according to what they thought in that moment was, because they were not clear in that moment. So even though they could have undertaken what you just, they could have killed the Kauravas, they were having these narratives going on. And these narratives were stopping them from actually, taking a different course of action. So because they were not clear in that moment, they used, by the time they realized what happened, because after that anger is calmed down, your mind comes back, you can able to think properly. They were able to use that time and develop these proper skills and then express that form of killing and upholding dharma at a much later time. So yes, there's no difference on a surface, but there is a difference in a strategy base.
My mind is, saying that these were similar because of the fact that in the court, when they lost the game, they took the vow there and then, and telling them, okay, we will kill you. This is my vow. And if we look at Duryodhana had all the power. Nobody was, speaking against Duryodhana. He could have killed the Pandavas, there because they were now under his authority. But Duryodhana also strategized that, okay, instead of killing them right now, just give them the exile of 12 or 13 years. So that's why my mind is saying that, okay, it was similar. What was the difference?
There's also a part where Duryodhana actually, I don't think Duryodhana wanted to kill them in that way. He actually wanted to...
He was trying to kill them even from, from his childhood. He did that with Bhim. He did that, during the time of that wax house. And his intention was to just remove them, either by killing or just moving them away, as far as he can.
Well, I mean, he did exile them, but then again, he was in the court. So, I mean, I don't know if he had the chance to kill them or not. But the agreement was to exile them. So, he upheld that agreement. Right. I mean, he could have, but I mean, the situation just turned out that he said, you need to go away. And now the Pandavas were away, and then he wanted to kill them while they were exiled, if you remember that. Remember that? Yeah.
So the question is intent. Intent of Duryodhana was to kill them.
Yeah.
But he did not.
Yeah.
But he did not because of the situation.
Yeah. And
But if we look at Pandu, their intent was also to kill them after they lost the game, and because of the disrespect he did with Draupadi. Their intent was also to kill Duryodhana. But they also, they bought time. They waited till battle.
Yeah. Well,
but they told their intention by taking the vow there and then only. Bhima said, I will kill Duryodhana. I will, break his leg and kill him. And he also said, I will kill all the 100 brothers, in the battle.
Yeah. Well, they did certainly fulfill that promise after the exile. But also Duryodhana wanted to kill, he attempted several attempts to kill the Pandavas while they were in the forest. And the Pandavas, I believe, they actually avoided that. So Duryodhana, because again, he couldn't hold back his coping, he kept on expressing it outwards. But the Pandavas kept avoiding that. So, they had to constantly be on alert. Whereas the Pandavas, they made a promise, we're going to kill the Kauravas. And they were able to stick by that. They were able to be self-disciplined and uphold that. That's why they didn't, stop their term and say, no, we disagree with this. So now we want our kingdom back. They could have done that easily. So this also shows the discipline of the individual.
Hi, Andre.
Yes.
I think in the court, when they were playing the game and lost, they both could have killed each other if there wasn't the presence of Bhishma and Drona and all the other people around. They could have taken the wrong action on each other. But I think because of the respected elders were around, they actually respected that situation and only displayed their anger in looks and words and things, and not actually in action.
Yeah, okay. So many things could have happened. That's the reality, but it just happened this way. Okay, the story, okay, we got 3 minutes. So the story now is, okay, after the 13th year, one day after the 13th year, so now they've done their whole term, Duryodhana's spies found the Pandavas, but they were late by one day. So what happened is the Pandavas said, no, we've done our term, but Duryodhana disagreed. He said, no, you were within the time limits and I found you. I found you within the 13th year. So now you need to go back to the forest for 12 years. And so he refused to relinquish the kingdom to the Pandavas. Even though the elders, all in the court said, according to the Vedic calendar, you were absolutely, late by one day. But Duryodhana said, no, I disagree. In other words, he's projecting, and he refused to relinquish the kingdom. So in attempt to end this conflict, imagine that, right? You finally got your 13 years over and you want to receive your kingdom back, Indraprastha, and then the other says, nope, I'm not giving you back your kingdom. So it's not black or white. We don't always get in life what we want, even though if we rightfully deserve it. So this is what happened to the Pandavas. So to attempt to end this conflict, Krishna decided to play the role of negotiator. So he decided to go to the court of Hastinapur, and he wanted to speak to Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra couldn't say anything because he had so much love for his son Duryodhana. So then Duryodhana spoke up, and he says, "No, I'm not. I don't want to participate in this." So Krishna said, "Okay, that's fine." So Krishna said to him, "Return Pandavas their share." Like, it was very direct. He said, they rightfully deserve what they deserve, their kingdom. Return that to them. And then Duryodhana said, no, I'm not doing that. And then Krishna is like, that's fine. Return to them one district. So it's a smaller place now. And again, Duryodhana said, no. Okay, that's fine. And then Krishna says, okay, return to them one village. No. Fine. Return to them 5 houses. No. That's fine. Return to them 1 house with 5 rooms. No. And then Duryodhana says, if they want 1 inch of land, they're going to have to fight me. And this is the point when all negotiations failed and the war was declared. So this is now the new setting where the war is going to begin. Now, next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze this, because Krishna here is showing us how to negotiate with difficult people. He's actually quite good at it. And I'm going to integrate this example with another example that I know how the policemen actually negotiate with difficult subjects who are the least tolerant, least conforming to authority. And I'm going to bring these 2 examples so that we have some idea how to deal with those who are violating the law, whether it's difficult children or difficult family, difficult friends, difficult students, difficult associates, difficult employees, anyone that's difficult or that's violating the law. I want to address how to go about doing this in a non-threatening manner, because it fits perfectly with how Krishna actually addressed this. And then I'm going to ask further questions. Why couldn't even Lord himself convince Duryodhana to take the right action? Even the Lord himself, Lord Krishna, couldn't tell Duryodhana this is what's right. And I'm going to look at that. What's the teaching there? Okay, so lots of lovely subjects to discuss next week. Okay, any questions before we close?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Yeah.
So we find it easy to decide and go to sleep, but it seems difficult to decide and think about moksha, when both requires surrender of individuality. Why it makes moksha difficult than going to sleep?
Okay, you have to clarify that. What do you mean? So you're bringing us sleep with moksha. How does this work?
So I'm just saying that, when the waker wants to go to sleep,
yeah.
the intellect decides, and then waker vanishes.
Yeah.
We lose our individuality, and then we go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
When attaining moksha is also, surrendering our individuality. But towards moksha, intellect does not accept losing of the individuality, easily.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay, I understand now. Thank you. Again, what we're doing here is we're trying to use this example of sleep and kind of equate it to moksha itself. So again, this example absolutely does not go outside its boundaries. It was only meant to show us the definition of this, a possibility of second type of surrender. For moksha, the intellect has to remain there because who is the one that recognizes that I'm now free? Obviously, the intellect has to remain. And also for moksha, it's completely different because it's not like the individual disappears. This is all Neo-Advaita talk, by the way, where the individual is no longer there and there's nobody doing anything. And what else did they say? There's no enjoyer and, and who's the one that you can't attain moksha. All of these terms are just bogus. So when we speak about moksha, it's not about eliminating anything. It's just understanding that the very reality of the individual is not apart from the reality which I'm seeking. And who is the one that ascertains that knowledge? The intellect. That's why we say that moksha takes place in the intellect, in the buddhi. So it's not like the intellect goes, it stays, but it just recognizes that the very essence of the intellect is the same essence of the one intelligence. Okay, so it's two totally different, discussions now.
Thank you.
I think maybe Meena was thinking about bhakti, right? Maybe because when you do bhakti, you surrender yourself to the higher powers. So that's one way of getting moksha. That's my little understanding I have.
First of all,
I know it's completely different subject altogether.
No, Adi Shankara is very clear that only jnanam, all of these are means. Only jnanam is leading to moksha because the problem is ignorance. The problem is not a lack of not having some deity in my life. I have to first know who is this person that is devoting themselves. I have to know who is that one, and that's where knowledge takes place. So yes, we do acknowledge the presence of bhakti and karma yoga that has its place, but it all leads to, you have to then ask then who is doing all of these things? Like what's the truth, the essence of this person?
Andre?
Yes.
We sleep. Do we decide with our intellect to sleep? I thought it's just sleep comes over us. Like we start feeling sleepy, so we decide to go to bed. But we don't actually decide when to sleep, do we?
Well, you can decide. You can certainly hold yourself
because if
up.
thoughts are going on, you won't sleep anyway. So even though we say, I want to go to sleep, the more you think, the more you're awake.
Yeah, the more you think. So what do? You first calm down your mind because a noisy mind is not going to go to sleep.
But there's a kind of sleep coming on and taking over, isn't it? It's just we don't know exactly what time. It just comes on and takes us off to sleep.
Yeah. Now this is, of course, now step into a different topic, because now I have to get into Maya's 3 states, which is what produces sleep. See, you don't do anything. It's given to you.
Yeah.
Because nobody in sleep, for example, presses a button and goes into dream, and then from a dream they press a button and go into deep sleep, and then press a button and go into waking. It's all done for you through these 3 states, which is talked in Mandukya Upanishad. I don't want to talk about that because it's a totally now different conversation. But I understand how you can take one example and then fly with it. Yes.
Andre?
Yes.
You were talking earlier about praying. At the beginning. Who do you pray to, though? Who do you pray to? Because mine's still, like a white fluffy man in the clouds or whatever. Like that's what I can't get past.
Yeah. Okay. So it depends who you pray to on what is your understanding of reality. If your understanding of reality that Ishvara is away from this reality here, then you're praying to something that is away, which is also fine, because at least you're acknowledging the presence of Ishvara. That's much better than denying. The second stage is, it's not about who you pray to, but simply appreciating that whatever you pray to is not separate from the one reality, which you're also not separate from. So it's like, in India, if you pray to Ganga, it's not like you pray now to atoms, but you're understanding that one intelligence called Ishvara, which puts all forms together, that intelligence is never away from anything that you pray to. For example, if you take a rock and you just analyze the rock. Now, what is a rock made of? It's made of smaller molecules, and then atoms, and then particles. Now, at every level of that rock, you just take the subatomic particles themselves vibrating or moving in a specific fashion as to create atoms. And those atoms are put together in an intelligent fashion to create molecules. And those molecules are put together in an intelligent fashion to create, for example, a granite rock, right? So at every level, or even look at we'll take your own body. If you take, for example, your liver, right? You just say, okay, liver, what's the big deal? Well, look at how many intelligent things are going on just to create a liver. Right, and then you got like tissue, you got muscle, you've got blood, how the blood's going to move through the liver. And then you got the liver itself put together with all of the other organs in the right place so that they can all work together in a proper, coherent manner. You don't do any of that. It's all put together for you. You're just born with this body. We just put food in our stomach, and then, it all grows by itself. You don't move your neurological cells in the brain. You don't move your blood up and down from the feet all the way to the head, right? You don't digest your food. So many processes are going on without any need to get involved in them. So now you have to ask, well, who and what is creating and sustaining this kind of organism to work together consistently 24/7? You don't do any of it. It's done for you. So that intelligence, which is the very intelligence that runs your body, your brain right now, is the very intelligence that puts together this entire world. So knowing that, where's now the question of who do you pray to? If you're praying to just the one same intelligence, that is the truth of the entire universe, from the galaxies, from the supernovas, to the smallest ant, to the cockroach, to your heart beating, to the blood itself, to anything, to the smallest, subatomic part, to the quark, as small as you go, it's all just that one same intelligence, Ishvara. Now, if that understanding is there, then who am I praying to? That doesn't even come, because you're praying to that one same reality.
Thanks, Andre. Yeah, it's just, comes and goes, that one. But, it's a big one.
Yeah, I'm going to get into the higher teaching once we go through the Mahabharata, because there's an order to everything that I do. And this is why I refuse to jump into detail when it's not appropriate. Okay. Okay. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.